Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, 25 years serial tech entrepreneur. My new book, Fail Hard, Win Big, is coming out this June 2025. This is my story of having over 30 ventures with 20 failures and 10 wins. I guess if I was a baseball player, a 333 batting average would put me in the Hall of Fame. The common element of every venture I've done is building custom software to improve operations, to create a better client and end user experience and enhance enterprise value. I'm now the CEO of Sononify Technology, a custom software development firm. Today, we are joined by Jeff DePascale out of Pennsylvania, just south of Philly. Jeff has a great story. He is an engineer who rose up the ranks. He's a two-time CTO, and he's not just a technical guy, he's a creative guy with music and photography. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Glad to be here.
Jeff, if you would, take a minute or two and walk everybody through the journey of your career and what's led you to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. So I, as you mentioned, started from the development side, quickly transitioned into more of the leadership role and eventually over to the business side about 10 years or so ago, primarily in the enterprise world. Originally, I was at Cognizant Technology for close to a decade. We built an omnichannel cloud contact center solution there with a number of Fortune 500 customers. So really kind of grew into this role in that space of, how are we applying technologies, bleeding edge technologies for, enterprises. Always a finicky thing when you're bringing something that new to the game. And we're talking early twins here. So that was a bit of a challenge at times of just trusting that SaaS is okay for these kinds of things, that kind of stuff. I transitioned out of that for a brief period into launching a startup as a CTO that was focused on science education using VR with the goal of AR eventually for where that would go. And unfortunately, that was the year prior to COVID. So we had a great product, a great launch with a number of school systems that loved the concept. And then immediately the idea of putting a headset on a kid just disappeared in 24 hours thanks to COVID. So that one wound up not working out. Thanks to that, though, I still firmly believe in the potential for AR in the education space over the next decade or so. And that brought me to where I am today at CallRevu. So as a CTO here, I oversee product and technology. We are historically going back to I joined in 2020. The company was founded in 2007, I believe, or 10. And it was a BPO outsourcing company for doing call analysis for automotive dealerships, where we're listening to calls and saying, hey, here's something that didn't quite go the way you would have expected, was the original premise. Are people talking to our customers the way we want them to, things of that nature. And in the time that I've joined, after the business scaled, the opportunity became, well, how do we scale and expand the footprint for our customers and what we're doing? So it's grown to be, number one, we moved away from BPO completely to AI. We finished that transition. It's 100% AI-based product. And then it became about how do we scale what this product is doing for what really the original thing that customers were asking our company to do was, can you help us manage the communications in our dealership better? Because we can't be on every call. We can't hear everybody's being engaged. And it's not just about phone calls eventually either, too. What's every touch for that customer? And that's where we're kind of headed. So what we've done since is expanding the analytics platform, first and foremost, to be truly bespoke for this auto industry, that we have a sales focus for those types of engagements and a service focus. But we've also, through acquisitions, scaled into doing the actual phone system itself on top of that. And our most recent things in the past year have been focused more on training opportunities, again, leveraging AI, which there's a product we have called Test Track that we launched earlier this year that is a tool where a salesperson can engage in a given business scenario with a person that doesn't exist, powered by AI as a voice communication. And you're gauged on that of, did you accomplish the goals of that call? Could your tone have been better, et cetera, with the goal of preparing you to do that better. And then where we're going with that is now, because we have visibility to every interaction in that dealership where that person may engage, are you doing it in practice? Or is it maybe a little rough around the edges and we need to identify an opportunity to reinforce that? Let's have you do this module and upskill, that type of thing. So we're shifting towards leveraging AI to be, how can we proactively improve things within the dealership for leadership and the end user?
So CallRevu started as kind of a BPO outsourcing company for automotive dealerships and really transformed into a full tech-enabled company.
That's right.
In layman's terms, what makes the Revu solution a game changer for your clients?
I think it's the holistic approach to managing communications across the board, because you can piecemeal a lot of these things. You can go with any VoIP provider, you can go with any analytics provider. There are training providers doing similar things too, but realistically, when you want to look at the entirety of I'm solving the macro level problem, not this specific thing, there's a holistic aspect to that, with combined with the fact that we have access to whatever you want us to have access to because of all the components tied together. That allows us to really address the overall solution from the whole. And when you're looking at it that way, you're really addressing the business problem and not the technical pieces.
Now, you've been CTO there for almost 5 years. I always like to ask my guests, how did you get the role?
How did I get the role? I mean, I was recruited for this one. So I guess the thing that stood out, meaning like why did they pick me? Is that what you're asking?
So let me give some more context.
Sure.
The CTO role has definitely been a challenging role. You got to appease non-technical stakeholders, keep the technology moving. And there's been a lot of movement from the CTO in the industry over the last couple of years. So I know, and a lot of our listeners are CTOs, tech leaders. So they always want to know, how people landed their jobs, whether it was, did you apply for it? Was there a headhunter? Did you know somebody? So that's kind of where I'm getting at here.
Okay. Yeah. This one was a headhunter, actually.
Okay.
LinkedIn reach out for it via headhunter.
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, and thanks for sharing that. What current projects are you working on today?
So, going back to what I said earlier, it's currently about expanding that vision of how can we really make the perception for our customer that it's this entire platform with all of these pieces. And there, I'll save the detail, but there's a number of ancillary products that can kind of complete the circle of products that you want to provide to your customers, that we're solving the whole of what you're looking for the answer to be for your business problem. So for us today, it's partially about where are those new opportunities to fill in some of those holes. Some of those things are through internal development. Some are through partnerships that make more sense to deliver as just a bolt-on thing effectively that solves part of that. You can just, through one vendor, solve everything you're looking for around the concept of managing my communication. Automotive specific, there is a common thing I've heard many times from GMs of dealerships that last I heard, the average dealership has between 75 and 130 vendors that they're managing.
Wow.
So one of the best things you can do is just say, well, you can have one throat to choke, and we're happy to be that throat, because we want to have that great customer experience, which part of it is having great products that do what you're solving the problems you're asking. The other part of it is, are you getting the support and account management that you're looking for, which is another big part of our business that we really try to amplify as much as possible, that we really care. We want you to like the products. We want you to buy into the fact that the value proposition actually solves your business problem. It's not just tech for the sake of tech, which can be a perception out of the gate when you're dealing with some of these more bleeding edge technologies. Am I buying this just because I think it's cool? Or am I buying it because, it might be kind of cool, but it is also solving a problem for me, which when you're using voice AI for training, for example, is very much something that can go up in the sales cycle of, wow, this is really neat. But are we then implementing it in a way that's actually solving what your needs are? So we have components of our account management division that are specifically geared towards that, for that tool, for exactly that reason, that we don't want it to be something that you buy it and say, well, I don't really know how to apply this for the business I am looking for. So that's a big part of it too. And along those same lines, for where our roadmap's going, a lot of it's about expanding those tool sets to be more expansive in a way that they're allowing you to customize what you're looking for your specific needs. So as one brief example, I think about 4 months ago now, we built a capability that your sales playbooks as a dealership, just upload them into the tool. We'll use AI to analyze that and make some recommendations for one or more modules you could build around those particular goals. And then again, using the AI now to take that prepared module, apply that as a suite of training tools for your dealership. Now, above and beyond that, we've added in very recently in the past month or so, LMS capabilities to go along with that. That now, in addition to just that, we call kind of a batting cage approach of get in there and try this call, that you can also have the content that you want people to review related to that, the training certificates, that kind of thing. So on that piece, that's where all that goes. The other side of the fence of the analysis of all this in practice is the other big part of where we're bringing this together to, as I mentioned earlier, kind of complete that circle of, we're providing the training, you're doing the training, we're certifying you, we're validating that you're using it in practice or not. And then in an approach that's more about enabling the actual salesperson so they buy into this too, that it's about, hey, we see an opportunity for you to upskill. Here's a component of that. And all of this ties back to the core of all of this is with the phone system we provide and the analytics that we're providing, that at a dealership level, this should all lead to happier customers, more engaged customers, knowing if, like, we've all experienced calling into a dealer for our car and finding that there's no bay, I can't get my car in. or much more to the point, I want my car back and you didn't tell me it's ready, which we've all experienced that. That's a very common thing that we hear dealerships talk about, is just measuring that piece alone of how often is that happening? And does that make them want to go to another competing dealership? There are simple problems to solve when you can look at the holistic whole of the data of everything going through that dealership and saying you're trending in the right direction or you've got a problem.
Now, talk to us about your engineering team, how you're structured, your work model. Are they remote, hybrid?
So we are 100% remote. As I joined during COVID, we went from being a mostly regional and partial remote to 100% remote pretty rapidly. So the entire company actually at this point is basically a remote workforce, which I think has actually been very beneficial, especially when you consider the regional nature of our customers. You want to be close. Salespeople and account managers have always been like that. For us on the product and tech side, it's very much opened up the ability to look for the right person with the right background for what we're looking for in our team structure as well. So our team is comprised of three pillars. We've got product engineering, and then we have a data and AI group as well. Those are three direct resources that report to me. In each one of those, we have a mixture of direct hires, and then for development and QA scale, for example, we have some nearshore engagement there where we got some flex as necessary.
Gotcha. When structuring teams, have you seen an ideal balance of who you have in-house versus who you might use as contractors?
Absolutely. And I'll say that very much comes out of learnings from working in a company like Cognizant years ago now, where their entire business model is offshoring. We were a small group that was acquired into that company, and then that was kind of thrust upon us of, hey, you should offshore because that's what we do. And it was very tough to scale that way. It's coming from a smaller group size too. And I will say that the one thing that I learned out of that experience that has stuck with me through my career is when you are doing offshoring, are you familiar with the concept of a two-in-a-box approach?
Yes.
Yeah, so just to explain if people haven't heard it before, just the idea of having a primary offshore and a primary onshore resource, that they're the ones that engage, and it tends to resolve the offshore time shift component because you're allowing for just, this is the one person I engage with, I've got the 2 hours in the morning or whatever your time box is, and then they're picking up and making sure that you're continuing through on the offshoring component. That's worked for me in components where you really have a deliverable that does well in that exact type of model, which tends to be the more, in my experience, when you're building a whole proprietary SaaS stack, the more compartmentalized pieces that are not truly a one-off maybe necessarily, but isolated in some capacity are a little bit easier managed that way. Nearshore is dramatically better, in my opinion, for this type of work that we're doing, where the vast majority is on your proprietary stack, where if you're already remote, there's really no difference with pulling in somebody who's a nearshore in terms of their day-to-day engagement. They're joining the same Teams calls that everybody else is in the same way, and they're producing the same way. So I found that the balance that works best tends to be that you have to have some level of going all the way down to individual contributor in-house on staff. If anything, for key man risk redundancies, things like that, but you always have to have that groom up opportunity too. You want to be building the next generation of the company in some capacity. So you have to have that piece. But beyond that,
what ratio do you
is.
try to keep? Is it 50% in-house, 50% contractors? Is there a ratio you try to keep?
Inclusive of architects and leadership, it's probably in the ballpark of 50-50. But at an individual contributor level, it's more like 30-70 on in-house to onshore.
Well, and you mentioned nearshore. I started my company, Sonatify Technology, because I was frustrated working offshore, where I saw a shift in the market maybe around 2016, 2017, as cloud and mobile technologies became more advanced, that need for constant collaboration became more and more prevalent. And it's kind of hard if you only have an hour or two overlap with a resource, and you're also dealing with different cultures that sometimes I call the yes culture, where do you understand? Are you good? Yes, yes. You go to bed, you wake up 8 hours later, it's not done, and you want to bang your head against the wall.
Or worse, that person quit because of the turnover rates potentially too.
Exactly. So with that said, retention and growth of talent is critical. How have you gone about making sure you're keeping your team, keeping your A players, whether they're a part of your in-house or your outsourced team?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm pretty proud to say that retention's been very, very strong on both sides, actually. As a matter of fact, we had a resource on nearshore that predated me until not that long ago. So they're engaged and feel supported. I think obviously it should go without saying that financials matter, right? We're all working for a living, regardless of whether you're a direct hire or nearshore. And I think not acknowledging that is a massive mistake as a leader. I really don't like when I hear people say we're all a family here, because I think it's a great way of walking around that exact topic potentially. But you should look at it that way. Everybody's got their own career path, and that doesn't matter whether nearshore or direct hire. So in some ways, obviously that's the That's the table stakes, right? It's got to be something that's worth doing. But then it's got to be something that I want to do. And then I feel like I'm in a team that I want to work with. And I think we've done a pretty good job as a leadership team, myself and my direct VPs that report to me. We are very, very aligned in the cultural aspects are really, really important. And being accommodating of, neurodiversity is a very common thing, especially in technology, and being accommodating of that and understanding of that and making that clear is important too, because there's going to be strong players that they may never want to be on camera. And in some cases, for the role you're in, that's totally
Are you
okay. And
saying
you're going to want to work
engineers
here.
are unique and kind
They
of
are.
weird in their own way? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was a developer too. I guess I've kind of grown to be able to do the business side, but I have my idiosyncrasies. It's part of the job, and so I think part of the leadership job is understanding and leveraging that. Because the truth is, you need that uniqueness in your spectrum of your team to really deliver something that is spectacular, really.
And it's interesting, and certainly when doing staff augmentation of resources, whether it's nearshore, offshore, or onshore, making sure they feel part of your team and not an outsider is we've seen critical to success. And it sounds like that's something
That's
that
core to our approach.
you've learned
Yep.
along the way as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
Very cool. So talk to us as a CTO. What's your current or ideal tech stack and why?
My ideal tech stack is the one that's most relevant to the business that we're running. And I know that's kind of a silly answer, but it's not, because realistically, like I joined the company already existing in 2020. If you come in saying I only work this stack in these technologies, when in reality,
and you have to change everything, right?
Well, and on top of that, you're probably not coding anyway, right? I mean, and let's ground this that there's two different categories of CTO that are both valid. If you're in a smaller company and you're a leader that's also hands-on, this applies a lot more and it's more relevant. If you're more in the situation that I'm in, where those people are one or two levels below you, if the technologies you prefer are entering your thought, you're making a mistake. It's got to be what's right for the business, for the stage that it's in, and what's going to achieve the goals for the growth you're looking for, security, compliance, et cetera. And sometimes changing something that drastic is actually necessary. But these days, really probably not, because how often are you encountering a company that you're joining and they're moving off of hard infra, so you got the choice of what cloud you're going to go to? Generally not the case, right? So it's really, that's the answer, is where are you starting from and what do we need to change and why? That's going to define it.
Gotcha. Now, into your engineering process, has your team been able to introduce and utilize any of the AI tools out there, like Windsurf for Cursor or GitHub Copilot?
Yeah. So it's been an ongoing experiment that is, I think, for every organization, and that,
and whatever we say is great today, there'll be something else next week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's truly almost that fast at this point too. So for us, the biggest movement has been, I mean, and number one, I'll say that for front end development and ML development, it's been more in place for a while, just because there's so many lather, rinse, repeat code components there that you can successfully do that, even with the earlier versions before the more modern stuff that's popped up in the last 6 months. The most success we've seen recently has been in some in-house tooling that has been developed, purely vibe coding and then editing, which is really the key skill set for this. Is anybody can say, hey, generate this thing, but can you modify that code to make it work the way it's supposed to, is still the limiting factor of, hey, great, this is something we can actually use. And we've started to see some real success there with more at the architect level currently, because of that acumen and deep background of, I'm going to debug something I didn't actually build. But we've seen some good success there in the tooling space, mostly so far, of enabling better R&D, things along that nature, where we've accelerated things by developing tools specifically for that.
So talk about that, because vibe coding is a great thing to come up with new ideas quickly, but it's not a good thing to scale from often the model that you're building. How do you manage that?
Well, using it in the right places is the answer today. And I will close all of this as what you just said, that I guarantee you, if we talked again a year from now, I bet what you just said is not the same context, right? So it's a today question, right? So for us, I mean, there's currently no production stuff that's customer facing as part of the stack that came from that realistically. What is happening is code assistance augmentation in that area is something we're moving more heavily into and is being utilized. But if you're building a tool for that to advance your R&D, which is what we've seen happen so far, is, hey, this process that, when we're developing this new prompt and we need to be able to do testing at scale around that how much of this is the same thing over and over again? What can we do to automate those steps and potentially elevate it to more of a very skilled business user role instead of a true technologist? that's the space that the opportunity really came up in. And that's something that only has to work as well as you need it to work for that R&D process. It's not about security and compliance or scalability. It's enabling your team to produce faster. And it's been great in that regard.
Gotcha. Great answer. And I've had a lot of smart CTOs make kind of a funny comment that when you look at trends, having somebody with 5 years of core strong coding experience, the technology changes so quickly that it's kind of like 5 years in a certain tech stack and skill set is the most you could do, because then you have to be able to adapt.
Yeah, agreed.
You mentioned before the show that you're about 10 years removed from hands-on coding.
Yeah.
In your day job, do you still tinker on the side at nights and weekends to build stuff to make sure you're understanding what your engineers are going through?
It's a really great question. And I'll take it back to in 2015 when I was at Cognizant and I was asked to move from being the director of engineering to the venture lead for the business unit we were in. I was given one of the best pieces of advice I ever received in my career. And it was great because I hated it when I heard it and I firmly believe in it now. So there's something there. And what I was told was, you can keep doing this on the side if you want to as a hobby. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can never contribute a line of code to the platform ever again. And the reason why is if you're in any capacity attached to the micro, you will never holistically be able to look at the macro truly objectively. And I have preached this every year since I fully received it as this is real, which took a couple of years to really I'm going to give up the thing that made my career start. Well, I did. And it took about 6 months before I felt like I was outmoded. And about a year after that, it was, well, I really hope I picked the right course because I can't go back. And, at this point, I firmly believe I did pick the right course. I would go so far as to say I probably wouldn't have been a good long-term senior developer. And I think that's important to acknowledge. You should be one of the weakest people on your team in any given area as a CTO. I very much am in a good way, I think. And these days, I think the last time I really sat down with a pet project to code something. I got into doing Raspberry Pi stuff with my kids for a while, and then it was really more about me than the kids because I enjoyed it. So I got back into Python.
Educate me. What's Raspberry Pi? I don't know what that is.
It was the great COVID project is how I like to refer to it. That's what everybody seemed to do is what can I do to tinker? Well, with all this downtime. So at that point, it was building DIY projects with just, Raspberry Pi, just a little basic computer module. You can do anything with it, really.
Okay.
So I did everything from building remote controlled Etch-a-Sketches to streaming devices, et cetera, just to dabble. And that involves some level of coding. I've done some coding here and there on just if I want to proof of concept something just for myself. This has been about maybe 3 years now, but I did that a few years ago to say what about this, guys? But then I also quickly realized when I did that, I probably shouldn't do that anymore because again, it gets you a little bit too focused in the how, not the why. So even there, I've really pulled it back. And I think that's overall been beneficial.
Gotcha. No, that's an interesting viewpoint. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there.
I
think it depends on the size of your organization. And
very much so.
I appreciate sharing the advice from Cognizant, one of the big tech companies out there. So as a CTO in 2025, what's the biggest challenge you're facing now?
Probably one that a lot of companies are facing, which is just that the how rapid even just individual feature release stuff competition can be, right? That you're constantly, there's a juggling match, just to double back here for a second, let me restart the answer. There's a constant juggling match between who's neck and neck in the horse race for what, and who's winning the race at the end of the day because they pace themselves right. But you don't want to appear slow. You want to appear like you're iterating fast. You don't want to release too fast because it looks like you're taking too many risks. There's a balancing act there of what are the right things to release at the right time that actually have business value. But more importantly, when you get to the end of the race, let's say it's just a roadmap for the year, just to put a quantification of what that means for the race for the year. Are we where we intended to be from the beginning? Did we make the right choices? Were we focused? And so, I think we've been very judicious in my company about, well, we could do these things and they sound exciting, but are they really going to land what our customers need? Or do we come back to that or do it through a partner and focus on these other things instead? And we've released more in the past 2 years than we ever did by quite a large margin. And some of that's due to constant efficiency improvements. But some of it too is just picking the right things to focus on, because if you're picking the right things that you can actually execute well, you will get more done that you're confident was stable, less bug fixes, et cetera. And so that's really, are you making the right plan at the beginning of the year, and are you adjusting through the year appropriately and doing that constant every 6 months refinement to keep that pace to get through the marathon?
Gotcha. Now, obviously, AI has overwhelmed everybody over the past couple of years with the advancements, both engineering, company-wide. Has your company gone as far as to put a company-wide AI policy in place yet?
Yes. Yeah, no, we did from the get-go because we adopted AI as part of our platform stack basically right when it was released on Azure. We were one of the first smaller, medium-sized companies on it,
And I'm
actually.
talking about within
I know you are.
engineering and the entire company.
Yeah, but because we adopted it from a platform perspective that early, this was a focus for us organizationally at the same time too. So yeah, we've had a policy in place of what tools you're allowed to use and how you can use them. We are in some capacity rolled out on a Copilot for 365, which I'm sure I'm not the only CTO who feels a little bit middling about it at points, but it's got promise.
They all have their pros and cons.
They do. Just don't use it in PowerPoint is what I would say today for sure. But there's the balancing act of that one is you have to be careful about what risks you're taking, and at the same time, who's not hiring resources today where you expect them to be able to utilize AI tools? Like, would you really hire somebody for any role today that doesn't at least have an understanding of how they can use it to scale themselves a bit? So you're getting that, that they feel unable to do how they feel they should approach their job, and you're getting more output out of that person because they're more efficient. You can't say no, but you have to say yes with a but, and make sure that you're checking the right boxes on risk.
And I have found through talking with different CTOs as part of the show, maybe 50% have company-wide AI policies. The other are figuring out the right way to get there. What advice would you give for people? I mean, geez, how often do you have to update this thing? Every 2 hours?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think part of it right now is be as macro and holistic as possible and not in the details and minutia, because that stuff will change constantly, to your point. It's more about setting a precedent for generally how we expect you to use these tools, and these are the tools we expect you to use, but how you use them can and will change over time, and the risks associated. I mean, yeah, you got to be updating your employee handbooks constantly as the risks change. And the other part of it too is as your customers are changing their expectations for your terms around those things, there's a balancing act there too of we want to accommodate where your risk concerns are, but you also want us to deliver a good product for you, and that can't impact our teams too much. So threading that needle is something you should be constantly aware of, looking at what's the right way today and how do I nudge it in the next quarter.
Good advice. Good advice. Jeff, what's one brutal lesson you wish you would have learned earlier as a CTO?
Don't be afraid to let your team be smarter than you. Which I think it happened naturally because of what I talked about of just detaching from what my core skill set was. But even with that, I think it's very hard to accept that you are not going to be the thought leader for execution rapidly if you're doing it right. Really, you should not be. And if you're really going to be the voice for technology to business and for the business to the product and technology teams, you have to maintain that level of approach. That this is what we're trying to accomplish, and stay the course on that, even if you like the things you want to engage on, because it's hard not to be excited about what the teams are doing sometimes, but being willing to step out of that and to be a bit of an outsider to their benefit, ultimately, of not getting in the way, and enabling them to, all boats rise kind of thinking, right? That's where you want to be in that scenario, that you're being lifted by what your team can do, and you're enabling that team and thereby enabling the business as a result of that. If I had gotten to that sooner, I think I probably could have achieved other things sooner in other roles that it took a while to get there. It's hard to see that when you're shifting out of individual contributors.
Smart engineers that rise up to the ranks of having the ultimate role of CTO, that's probably the biggest barrier, is being able to admit when you don't know something, because engineers are typically not programmed that way. And so that's
well said.
Absolutely great advice. Jeff, thanks so much for getting Uncensored with us today. Any final shout outs or advice for tech leaders you'd like to give?
Don't be afraid of change, and don't be afraid to let your resources grow and expect them to. You should want them to. I'll also go so far as to say that I commonly say that to my strongest players, I know that you could get a job offer tomorrow that you really should take. And if it's really something that we can't compete with, let's talk about that. But my goal is to make sure you're ready for that next role. And hopefully, if you feel enabled to do that, you're not going to want to leave. You're going to want to stay because you're in a place that you're being emboldened for the rest of your career path.
Phenomenal advice there, Jeff. And I'm with you, a big believer of culture. And as a leader, helping your team rise to whatever they can. And hopefully that's within your company. But if it's best for them, you wish them all the best. So awesome advice. Jeff, thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Everybody stay bold out there and keep building.
That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.